Nepal, and I'm really happy to
presentar al profesor el doctor Surya Shresta, director ejecutivo del NSET Nepal. Mr. Shresta has a long and successful technical career. For instance, he has an impressive record of management and leadership in earthquake technology and disaster risk reduction. Most recently, Mr. Shresta served as technical advisor to the National Reconstruction Authority and played an important role in supplementing vital information in formulating national-level policies. He's also serving as a member of the governing board of Global Earthquake Model, GEM, and before that, Mr. Shresta has led many successful projects and programs under his service at National Society for Earthquake Technology as a Deputy Executive Director. It's a great honor for me to present this conference. The name is Proyecto de reforzamiento de las Escuelas Kathmandú Nepal. Dr. Surya Shresta, thank you for visiting us through this conference.
Dr. Pablo, shall I begin now?
Yes.
So I will first, I will share my slide, if that is okay.
Okay.
Do you see my slide, Doctor?
Yes. Yes, I'm seeing your slides.
Okay, and my voice is also clear to you?
Yes, it is also clear.
Thank you. So I begin now. So hello, buenos dias, good morning to all of you in Ecuador and different parts of the world. As just introduced, my name is Surya Shresta. I'm from Nepal, and I'm really happy to join this conference in relation to the establishment of Center of Excellence for Earthquake for Risk Management, Assessment and Management. So I'm really glad to join this conference, and I convey my best wishes for the establishment of CERAM. And I would like to also thank Dr. Carlos Biasis for inviting me to this conference from joining from Nepal, which is in the South Asia region. So my topic of discussion today is School Earthquake Safety Program, Efforts and Lessons from Nepal. This is the brief outline of my presentation today, brief introduction of my organization and earthquake hazard and risk scenario of Nepal, framework of earthquake risk management, examples of successful initiatives and impacts and lessons and way forward. I'm talking on behalf of an organization which is a non-government organization, civil society organization, which was established 28 years before in Nepal, and which is basically was established to assist the government and to assist the people of Nepal in disaster risk management, and focus was on earthquakes. But we gradually are working towards multiple of hazards, landslides, floods, fires, etc. So in my organization, at the moment, we are 150, slightly above 150 staff, and most of us are technical staff. My organization, NSET, is a non-government organization and serving the government, the scientific community, and the community. We are serving as a link among these three group of institutions, three group of people, basically providing the translating the governance information, policy related information in the language of community. Likewise, scientific information, technological information, translating into the common man's language, people's language, and also helping government to understand the scientific knowledge, technical knowledge that can be properly reflected into policies. So we are serving as the link among these three important pillars, which are the key of risk reduction, disaster risk reduction. NSET serves as the link among these three group of people, three group of organizations. We collaborate. We work in collaboration with government, media, private sector, professional societies, volunteers, political group, etc. So collaboration is the key of our organization. And during this past 28 years of operation, we have my organization has worked for training of engineers, for training of local construction workers, masons, for training of teachers, for training of community responders, community volunteers, for training of instructors who can further train other people in the communities. We have worked on training other groups of people such as social mobilizers, such as community actors. And in these 28 years, we have reached out to more than 4 million people indirectly and more than 800,000 people directly in these 28 years. So this is a brief introduction of my organization where I'm working as the executive director. Let me give you a brief background of the country location of Nepal and the hazard scenario in Nepal. This is the global map, and here you can see the location of Nepal, and you can compare the location of Ecuador. So we are located here in the slightly in the northern hemisphere. And when we talk about the earthquake risk, Nepal is comparable to any other earthquake prone country in Latin America, as well as like in Japan or like in California, US, or like in Indonesia. So we have very high earthquake risk in Nepal. Not only earthquake risk, we have several other disasters every year. For example, in past more than 40 years, we have more than 27,000 different kinds of disasters, and average event per year is 584. We have 29 different kinds of hazards, different kinds of disasters, and significant loss of human lives every year. Approximate 2 events per year, different kinds of disasters, more than 2 deaths per year, more than, in an average, 1% to 4% of the gross domestic product of the country is lost by different kinds of hazards, different kinds of disasters. And in a extreme event, more than 20% of the GDP is gross domestic product is lost every year. So we are a very highly disaster prone country. And out of all those disasters, earthquake is the primary killer. So in long run, if we see, earthquake kills more than 207 people in a day, which is very significant, which is very high. And we had a earthquake in 2015, which killed more than 9,000 people and which devastated more than 800,000 houses, for which we are still doing the reconstruction. That's why my organization was established 28 years before, to work with the government, to work with the communities. And for working on earthquake risk management, a holistic concept was developed at that time. And by that concept, what we felt was, first of all, the disaster scenario, the potential losses during a earthquake or any other hazard, the scenario has to be developed. The earthquake risk assessment or disaster risk assessment has to be done. And that scenario or that loss estimation is helpful, in one hand, for the awareness raising of the people, raising awareness what can happen, what could happen during a disaster. That is used as earthquake awareness raising or disaster awareness raising. And also that scenario or that risk assessment result is used for planning the action planning. And that action plan has to be participatory, involving not just the decision makers, but involving the community, involving the relevant institutions, involving scientific community. Everyone of the community has to be involved in action planning. That's the second major component of a holistic earthquake risk management framework. The third is then starts the implementation of risk reduction and preparedness activities. And as part of the implementation, school retrofitting or demonstration of school retrofitting was one of the important component of our concept. Then it starts replication in all over the country. Replication outside of the country is another important component. And then monitoring, evaluation, learning, and further improvement in the program. So this is the sequence of a typical or a holistic earthquake risk management framework or earthquake risk management program that we have been doing. There are several methodologies, several tools for developing earthquake risk assessment, for doing earthquake risk assessment or disaster risk assessment. A simplified tool like Radius to a very rigorous tool like OpenQuake are available. But whatever tool we use, for a community to understand this earthquake risk assessment or disaster risk assessment, we have to translate that into the language of the people. All those complex earthquake risk assessment concepts and results have to be developed in common man's language. And most of the time in a country like ours, in a developing country, most of the time what we have to do is use available information. Whenever possible, do new research. But whenever there is limited possibility for doing new research, for the collection of the information, for the collection of data, then we have to rely on existing information and existing data. Build on the existing knowledge and experience of the local professionals. That's also very, very important approach that we use. Adapt or adopt available technologies to the local situation for the risk assessment, for the action planning. Sometimes it can be educated guess or professional consensus for some of the parameters that we use for risk assessment. So most important thing is involve all stakeholders in the risk assessment, because the risk assessment is mostly, it looks like it is a scientific exercise, but after the risk assessment is done, we need to involve as much stakeholders as possible. And then this has to be used as an awareness raising, capacity building event also. This is an example of participatory action planning process that we used some 18 years before in one of the municipalities of Nepal. As I said, this is a participatory action planning and scenario development process. This is the fundamental for driving communities for collective action for earthquake risk reduction. Most important thing is the scenario, the earthquake damage assessment, the earthquake risk assessment is done for the purpose of helping risk reduction. And for helping risk reduction, we have to involve all the stakeholders. That is the basic thing. And then after scenario and action planning done, we started the implementation of the risk reduction measures. And in Nepal, as a starting point or as an example of the earthquake risk reduction or disaster risk reduction, we utilized the school as important place for starting with. And we did the school retrofitting program for demonstration of the earthquake risk reduction intervention. So this is a typical example of school retrofitting. You can see a very small typical masonry school building which was retrofitted long before, more than 28 years before, and we used splint and bandage technology for the retrofitting of the school building. But during the school building retrofitting, we did a lot of training and we did a lot of awareness activities so that people are convinced with this idea and stakeholders are convinced, the masons are convinced, and masons are capable to do this retrofitting program. When we started the school retrofitting program, before starting that, we used the vulnerability assessment of all the school buildings of Kathmandu Valley, the capital city of Nepal. And we found that most of the school buildings were masonry, unreinforced masonry buildings, and more than 2/3 of the existing school buildings were highly vulnerable, near to collapse. And whenever there is an earthquake, there is every likelihood that the school buildings would collapse. And that's the alarming finding, and that prompted us to start the school retrofitting program. More than 2/3 of the school buildings are vulnerable. That's why it prompted us to start the school retrofitting program. And another fact is, school are the community centers in a developing country like Nepal. Whatever we do in school, that can be easily propagated to the communities. And school, everyone is positive to the school, and everyone is looking at school as a center of knowledge. That's why whatever we do in school can be very easily propagated to the communities. That's why we selected school as a center for starting earthquake risk reduction effort. This is a masonry typical small school building that we retrofitted for the first time in 1997. And in terms of technology, what we believed is that technologies should be the school retrofitting intervention solution should be technically feasible, economically affordable by the community, culturally acceptable. The tools, technical techniques we use should be culturally acceptable, and it helps to, or it should help to build the local capacity. So this type of technology or this type of intervention, if we select appropriately, then only communities accept. Otherwise, it's very hard to convince people to do a school retrofitting program in a country like Nepal, where the awareness about earthquake risk is very low. We started school building retrofitting program, but once we started a school building retrofitting program, it was not just limited to the school building retrofitting, but it required training of masons, because those masons, those construction workers involved in the retrofitting work, they need to understand the concept of retrofitting, the tools, techniques required for retrofitting very well. That's why we started doing the training of masons. Likewise, people need to be convinced, and for convincing, we started doing the community orientation. Government engineers and a lot of engineers were involved in the retrofitting program, and engineers also need to understand it properly, and we started training of engineers. Convincing government was also one of the major component. Institutionalization, because retrofitting one school is good, is important, but there are thousands of schools which require retrofitting, which require seismic safety programs, and for that institutionalization is required. So these are some of the other components. As soon as we started retrofitting, we started doing all these components in school retrofitting project sites. Our approach of doing school retrofitting program was mainly, we started doing it in community-based approach. Awareness raising on risk reduction measures was very important concept, because people then, I mean 28 years before, people were not very much aware about the earthquake risk, underlying earthquake risk, and people need to know the risk properly. That's why we started doing, or we did a lot of awareness raising activities, multi-stakeholder engagement or multi-stakeholder collaboration. Government, civil society, private sector were also involved in the school retrofitting program. Dissemination and replication of good practices, best practices, that works in the context of Nepal and in the context of developing countries. Assist community to manage, implement, and own the technology, because owning the technology is very important. Once the people are convinced with the technology, the retrofitting technology, the earthquake safer construction technology, then they replicate it. Otherwise, they don't replicate it. That's why managing, implementing the program by community themselves and owning the technology is very important. That's why this awareness and engagement with the community is also very important. Appropriate, cost-effective, and replicable technology, because we can choose for a high-tech technology, very complicated, robust technology, but if that is not understood by the community, if that is not locally acceptable, locally appropriate, and cost-effective, because cost is also a very important factor in a country like ours, if that is not cost-effective or very costly, then people wouldn't do it. That's why the technology that we propose should be appropriate, cost-effective, and replicable. Use of local materials, because if the materials are not locally available, then people hardly do it. That's why locally available material is also another important factor, and education and important empowerment is also other two key elements in the school retrofitting program. During the starting period in 1997-2007, our objective was to develop the model program and convince government, donor, and communities for the retrofitting. Another 10 years, we spent a lot of time in developing the vulnerability and risk reduction comprehensive strategies and programs. That was the priority of the second decade. And in 2011, 2015, our priority was to expand the retrofitting program. to work a lot with a lot of government and donor agencies to replicate the school retrofitting program. And by 2015, we did about 300 retrofitting of 300 school buildings during that period. And 2016 onward, continue replication and continue institutionalization process of school retrofitting under the school sector development program. So this is how the school retrofitting concept of school retrofitting evolved in Nepal. We retrofitted more than 300 school buildings during a period of 15 years. And there was an earthquake in 2015. It was magnitude 7.8. And that caused damage of more than 800,000 houses. And that included several school buildings around the region. And in our retrofitted schools, none of the retrofitted schools, even in epicentral area, did not suffer much damage. All the retrofitted school buildings survived very well during the 2015 earthquake. This is an example of the school retrofitted school which survived very well. And the school buildings were used as community shelter during the 2015 earthquake, relief center, health camps, etc. in the retrofitted schools. We worked with, in the retrofitting program, we worked with several government ministries and departments, district education offices, local governments. We worked with several UN organizations, UNICEF, UNDRR, UNDP, several bilateral agencies, USAID, DFID, the Australian government, DFAD, the Japanese government, JICA, international financing institutions such as World Bank, Asian Development Bank, INGOs, Plan International, Save the Children, ActionAid, American Red Cross, Geohazards International, etc. And also, most importantly, we worked with several academic institutions. Nanyang Technological University, Bristol University from UK. These are some of the universities with which we worked. And to develop appropriate retrofitting technologies was one of the important objectives of our collaboration with the academic institutions. The concept of school retrofitting was replicated in Pakistan after the 2005 earthquake, replicated in Bangladesh in 2012. A few schools were retrofitted in these countries, and United Nations Center for Regional Development replicated the concept of retrofitting in 17 different countries around the world. So this is very, very encouraging achievement that we achieved during past several years. Beside that, school retrofitting program was able to generate interest from several national and international partners, organizations, and schools, and that was culminated into a regional learning and sharing event in the form of student summit. So every year we used to organize a student summit in which we invite students and teachers from several countries in the region, and also several students and teachers from Japan and several other countries. This was basically learning and sharing of earthquake and disaster related information, disaster safety related practices in several countries and several schools. And every year we do this student summit. And last time we did was in 2019, and it was supposed to be done in 2020 and 2021, but unfortunately because of this COVID situation we could not do, and we are hopeful that we will be able to do this student summit, regional student summit, international student summit next year when the COVID situation is over. We continue doing school vulnerability assessments and retrofitting program. We continue doing awareness and training and capacity building programs. We continue do school disaster preparedness programs, and we continue doing advocacy and policy support related to school retrofitting and comprehensive school safety. And we are doing, one of the major components of our school retrofitting program is to do research for identification or finding out and for knowing the more details of more feasible and appropriate technology. This is one of the important components that we have been doing, research on knowing the better technology for retrofitting. I mean, in our case, I gave the example of the splint and bandage technology for the retrofitting of unreinforced masonry buildings, masonry school buildings. But there are several other technologies of school buildings which need retrofitting. For example, the the stone and mud buildings, for example, the non-engineered reinforced concrete buildings. And these need different kinds of retrofit solutions for different kinds of performance and different level of safety, and also based on the locally available materials and locally available human resources. That's why we need researches, and we have been doing researches. And this is an example of our collaborative effort with several universities in UK. We call that as a SAFER program with Bristol University. And through that program, we try to see the feasibility of several retrofitting technologies. And also as part of the program, we developed the school vulnerability assessment tool, mobile application, through which we are able to do the assessment of several school buildings and school facilities in several local governments in Nepal. And also we are trying to promote it in other parts of the region. So school vulnerability assessment tool. We need additional technologies which are technically good for retrofitting, technically correct, feasible, which enhance the earthquake performance of the school buildings. For a developing country like us, the technology should be economically affordable. If the technology is highly expensive, then people would not follow the retrofitting things. And in our case, the cost for a retrofitting a school building, usually we say if the cost of retrofitting is less than 1/3 of the total cost of new construction of a similar building, then it is said economically affordable. If the cost is higher than the 1/3 of the construction of new building, then we regard that as economically not feasible, affordable economic retrofitting solution. That's why it has to be economically affordable. The material has to be locally available, and the retrofit technology that we promote and retrofit details that we propose should be culturally acceptable to the people. And of course, it has to be sustainable, and that's what we call as an appropriate retrofit technology. Now we are going, these are the physical aspects of the school, but not only physical aspects of the school building is enough for safety of the school. For safety of a disaster safety of a school, of course, the school buildings or school facilities need to be safer. But at the same time, the disaster preparedness, the earthquake preparedness, or the emergency preparedness of the school itself, the students and teachers should be aware on the potential casualties, potential damage in the schools, and they should be prepared to respond to such events. That's the second component. And the third component is the policy, the systems also support the safety approach. So that's why we are now working on whole school safety concepts. And there are several private schools also in Nepal. So far, we have worked in government schools, public schools only. Now we are gearing towards making safety of private schools also. Affordable and simple technology, involvement of all, training, transparency, institutionalization. These are few other key elements of the school retrofitting program that we have been doing, and we have been doing it collaboratively so that people can understand it better, authorities can understand it better, and these institutions can replicate this retrofitting program. Now, there are several policies, plans, legal provisions which are developed in relation to promoting school safety in Nepal. And these policies have been helping to institutionalize the school retrofitting concept and school retrofitting program in Nepal. So this is an example of a feasible school safety program, the earthquake risk reduction or disaster risk reduction program that we have been doing in Nepal. And I believe the establishment of SERAM will definitely promote and help to reduce the disaster risk or earthquake risk of Ecuador and the region. And we will be very happy to collaborate with SERAM, to work with SERAM, and to provide our lessons, our experiences whenever appropriate, whenever needed. So once again, congratulations for the establishment of SERAM and best wishes for the future of SERAM. Thank you very much. I complete my presentation here, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address few questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Surya Shresta, for your excellent presentation. We have already here Carlos Villasis. Maybe he would like to do some questions.
No. Thank you. No, just happy to see Surya. Very, very nice. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for being with us. And it has been 28 years that we have been working together. So it's always a pleasure to be with you. We really appreciate not only your presentation, but your willingness to work with us, to walk with us. You know, when we started the NSET 28 years ago, it was a dream, and it's a huge reality now, and you can show many things that prove that. In Ecuador, we are starting that, so we hope you will work with us, and someday we will grow with you also, the same as NSET has grown. So thank you very much, and thank you for being with us, Surya.
Dr. Carlos, thank you very much for your kind words, and it's been more than 28 years actually, our collaboration and your support, your help during the starting days, or even the founding of NSET. So we appreciate and we always acknowledge your contribution to Nepal, Carlos, and we are it becomes kind of moral responsibility for us to reciprocate actually whenever there is anything we can do in Ecuador or any other part of the world, in developing world particular. So we will be very happy to share our knowledge and to share our experiences. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you, Surya.
Thank you, Carlos. Two important aspects, among others, of school retrofitting: Mason training awareness. What are the open questions related to, for example, Mason training? What are your new experiences, your ideas for the future?
When we started doing school retrofitting program, the retrofitting is done by the masons, by the construction workers. And it was interesting. Whenever we asked these masons, these construction workers, to do something related to retrofitting, they did perfectly what we suggested, what we asked them to do. But one question they asked was, okay, engineers, we do whatever you say, but tell us, what is the importance of doing this or that? Why you are keeping this element in here or that element in here? What do this jacketing? What does this jacketing do, or what does this band do? So please, if you can explain this to us, why these are kept here, and how this works in an earthquake, then only it is easier for us to understand this properly. So that was the question they asked us during the retrofitting program, and that urged us to think that, okay, training is required. Whatever we say, they do it, but if we do a training so that they understand why these elements are kept here, how these elements help to improve the safety, then they do it wholeheartedly. That is what we understood. And then we started doing training of masons. And during the training of masons, we basically explained about the earthquake risk, explained about how buildings or different types of buildings, masonry buildings, start damaging, how the buildings get damaged, and what are these bands, smaller bands, or what are these smaller elements that we put in these retrofitted buildings help to withstand the earthquake force. So they were convinced. And then during the training program, even we did a SEC table test, actually SEC table demonstration. This is not the SEC table that we do in laboratories, but a very small improvised SEC table where, I mean, it's a simple SEC table where we put a 1:10 scaled down models of a building, one with retrofitted technology and another with non-retrofitted or conventional building, shake in a same platform. And one building with retrofit technology withstand, the other does not stand. So that's how we showed people to how this retrofitting technology works. That's a simplified shaking table, and we use tools like this for convincing the mason. So most of the time, until several years back, we focused mostly on earthquake resistant technology only. But this is interesting question you asked. What is next future? So for the future, what we are trying to do now is we are trying to do comprehensive safety in a house or a school. I mean the safety related to environmental aspects, heating and cooling aspects, and safety related to other several aspects in a house. So we are now trying to go towards comprehensive safety in schools and in houses in terms of building technology also. That's how we see the future direction.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It was really an excellent presentation. I'm going to again share my screen, and I will continue with this moderation, with this presentation of other participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Pablo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, if you let me one thing, please. Just to have a whole idea of the impact of this. Every mason, every head mason, maestro mayor, that was trained is in charge, in average, of the construction of 10 structures a year.
Yes, right.
So the multiplying, you train one, and the multiplying effect is incredible. Second, after the training, we got and NSET got the mayor to give certificates to the masons. That was a way to motivate other masons to join the training programs. So
right.
We established also an incentive mechanism to have all of the things. And one of the wonderful things, in 2005, there was the World Conference in Japan, where the Hyogo Framework for Action was signed by 180 countries in the world. And the masons from Nepal were invited to Japan to make a demonstration on the shaking table.
Right.
That Surya is talking about. When I saw the masons of Nepal with their passports in the airport of Tokyo, we felt that we have changed something. Not only the retrofits and all, we changed lives. These people never even dreamt to take a plane.
Yeah.
And they were going to Japan to make a demonstration, the masons. And I'm sure that their lives changed, the lives of their children changed, the life of their colleagues changed. Their dreams are bigger than they were before. And that is what we need to try. Change the lives of the people.
Yeah.
And NSET has done that and much more.
Thank you, Carlos, for this compliment. Excellent. Yeah. It makes us quite happy when we see the real impacts in the community. It's not just change in one house, but it's a chain effect actually, and multiplying effect. When we train one mason, it is not just one mason and one family of the one mason, but it's several masons families, several masons that got excited or encouraged to take part in such work, and then it has got a multiplier effect. Yes, definitely, yes.
Gracias por esas hermosas palabras. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.